music tastes have become more omnivorous for like new generations increasingly, because they grew up having everything at your fingertips. It wasn't like, me, where I had an older brother who's feeding me like one kind of lane of music or whatever, and then you kind of take it from there and explore. Like, the boundaries are porous, and if there are boundaries at all, and see different production styles that incorporate wide varieties of interests and inspirations, and it's pushing music in really awesome ways.
Welcome to For the Record, a casual, mostly unedited conversation series presented by Grainmap, where we speak with music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. I'm your host, McKeegan Voice. Today, on episode 52, I'm speaking with Wyatt Marshall. Wyatt is SoundCloud's director of music intelligence and analytics, and he leads a team analyzing streaming trends and artist and fan communities on SoundCloud. His team's work informs fan, creator, and editorial strategy, and it plays a pivotal role in A&R. He's also a journalist and photographer who writes about music and data, culture, science, food, and healthcare. With Ian Chainey, he's been writing Stereogum's monthly metal column, The Black Market, for over a decade. Wyatt's also an old friend, and he and I chatted about some shared music spaces, working as music journalists, and all the music along the way, especially his prismatic world of metal. Hope you enjoy. Cool. Well, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, you too, dude. Are you doing pull-ups back there?
Yeah, not at the moment, but yeah, I mean, I try to remember to do them occasionally.
Nice. Yeah, I was worried I wasn't going to be in good shape for this, because I actually ran a marathon on Sunday.
Oh yeah,
and,
shit. How was it?
It was good. It was actually went quite well. Like, I didn't hit the time I was hoping for, but I did a totally respectable one. And I've been fighting off colds from kids, and that kind of like pushed me over the edge. But thankfully, I'm like doing better. But like, yeah, the kids have been sick for like 5 weeks straight, like various stuff. It's just like that time of year. But yeah, got it done.
Well done. Was it your first one?
It was. And a friend of mine from Carleton actually talked me into doing it, and then he backed out on me. So I was like,
dick.
Here I am. Like, I guess I gotta do it.
Who's the friend? Anybody I know?
I don't know if you know him, but he's kind of hard to miss. Evan Sander.
Oh yeah,
Everybody knows Sander.
Yeah, I don't know him well, but I definitely know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, you can pick him out in a crowd.
Yeah, indeed. I ran a marathon once, the Chicago Marathon, at this point now 12 years ago. And I remember thinking afterwards, like, I'm never fucking doing this again. But I'm not kind of reconsidering it. I mean, I just quit running for 6 months after I was done with the marathon. I injured myself and yada yada yada. But at this point, it sounds more appealing. Like even something like a little more intense, like an Ironman or something. You ever thought about that?
Not the Ironman, but I do have a buddy also from Carleton who does like sort of like a lot of trail running. Like he does crazy like ultra type stuff, and he sort of like is kind of like seeding my brain with the thought of like, hey, try trail running, sign up for a 50K. It's like, okay, maybe.
50K.
Yeah. So I think that's like kind of like the start for like some of those longer ones, and it gets crazier from there.
And there is something about that sounds appealing, just like, going out in the trail and running for, 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, no, I get it. I was not completely scared away by this marathon. I kind of want to do another one.
Cool.
So eventually we'll get there. Maybe somebody will do one with me this time. They won't back out on me.
I would do one with you, but I don't live in the same, in the same town as you're in anymore.
Well, hey, I kind of like the destination marathon thing too.
Okay, yeah. All right. Well, let's touch base. Keep it back in mind. Maybe the London Marathon or something we could do.
Ooh, I like it. Berlin, nice and flat.
All right, Berlin. I'm into that. Cool. Well, that's the first intro that we've ever had where we talked about marathons.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much that you want to use, but
I mean, why not? Um, but yeah, typically, with this, it's very conversational anyways, but we like to start just at the beginning of each person's relationship with music and just kind of track it back to day one. So obviously, you and I have known each other for a long time at this point, and I think I have a decent sense of your background and relationship with music, but I'm hoping also to learn some new things about you in this conversation. So yeah, I wonder if you could start by just, talking a little bit about, where you grew up and when your relationship with music started.
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. Yeah, so right on the water, capital Maryland. Naval Academy's there. That's something a lot of people know. My granddad was in the Navy,
Mm.
and that was sort of like the thing that brought us there. But I'd say like is very much like post or like MTV era kind of thing. And I had one of those cooler older brothers who was sort of my intro into a lot of interesting music, and
Mhm.
he was really formative in my own music first touch points. He was very much into heavier music, so he's a hardcore guy. He had like a hardcore band, and he started like middle school, and I remember he played um our middle school talent show. Like it was, everybody's up there doing their thing, and then my
Mm.
brother came up there with his band, and I remember he was the guitar player, and he broke a string, and it like ended their like one song set, and it was kind of like string broke, it's over. I think when you get older, you find ways to work around that kind of thing, or maybe don't
Yeah,
break
yeah.
it in the first place. But they were up there doing their thing and rocking out pretty hard. But he was into all these like kind of like hardcore bands like of the time. And he had like an older influence in high school who was sort of like seeding his brain with this stuff. And he was into stuff like Strife, Earth Crisis, 25 to Life, and things like that. And the hardcore thing never really clicked with me.
Mm.
Um, Later on, like punk music generally kind of did click with me, but he definitely put me on sort of this heavier music path, and around that was kind of a lot of more accessible bands or more mainstream bands, sort of like things like Nine Inch Nails, and he was had those early Metallica albums, Sepultura, uh, Slayer, things like that. And honestly, it wasn't that clicked with me. It was via all that hardcore nexus. He was also into some bands on Relapse Records, and Relapse Records, this sort of renowned metal label out of Philly. And on that label, they put out this CD called Spectrum Fest way back when. And I was always borrowing my brother's CDs and like playing them on, in the back of the car kind of thing on my headphones, when my CD wasn't skipping or whatever. And on that Spectrum Fest CD, there was an Amorphis song, and it was "Weeper on the Shore," which was from their album Elegy, which I later realized came out on my birthday, I think, of that year. Maybe it was
Wow.
'94. I can't remember. So it's sort of like this, like, oh, cool. And I heard that, and it was just sort of like this, like melodic death metal-y take without like the Cookie Monster vocals or whatever that people kind of associate with death metal, or the growls. There
Cooking.
was a little bit of that, but their singer at the time, this Pasi Kosika, and I'm pronouncing that wrong. He had like this sort of like really nice kind of nasally clean, and it was accessible enough for somebody like me who didn't really jive with like the super hard stuff that my brother was listening to,
Hmm.
where everybody's like swinging around, dancing like maniacs. That just like clicked for me, and I like became huge into like Amorphis, and it was sort of like they were like this really nice gateway to what at the time I now realized, or later realized, was sort of like popular-ish heavy metal. Still not on most people's radar, but like if you're in the metal world, like these are like kind of big bands.
Hmm.
And that was kind of like the seed was planted. From there, it was like, I had another friend who was super into like Iron Maiden, and you like feel like you're just like opening the gates into some new world when you first encounter these bands for the first time. It's like
Hmm.
you see DVDs of like Iron Maiden Rock in Rio, and it's just like
Hmm.
what, there's 300,000 people or something in the crowd singing along to every word, and they're coming in on a helicopter, and it just felt like you kind of like stumbled into this cool thing that like now you kind of like you touched it and now you're in.
Hmm.
So I'd say that was kind of like my intro into the kind of music that would have sort of like a lasting impact on, you know, what I've done, you know, to date.
Cool. Um, yeah, I'm curious. I mean, for people who are listening, me and Wyatt, we went to school together. Although we didn't really know each other at school, I think we kind of got to know each other afterwards. And I'm curious if that played a role at all, your relationship with music at Carleton, where we went to school. If you because music was a very big part of my time at Carleton in various ways, like working at the Cave, which was like the music venue that was on campus, and as a music major and all those things. I'm curious if it played a role, in your experience there as well.
It did. It was kind of like a time when I don't know. I'd never been to a place like I thought I knew what cold was before I went to Minnesota, but then you're from like northern Minnesota, right? Like,
No, not the north, the south, but still
okay,
cold, cold,
yeah. Anyway, Minnesota cold is like a whole different thing, and I had no idea. And I just like remember these like very vivid sort of like walks home from like class because it gets dark at like 4 in the afternoon, and like
Mhm.
the snow is like it's like ice snow crunching under your feet, and just like whatever you're listening to really had like a sense of place
Mm.
in those sort of like cold, dark, lonely kind of walks.
Yeah.
I thought that like was really sort of picturesque and sort of like sears into your brain like lots of different
Mhm.
sounds. Um, but socially, I don't think I had a whole lot of folks who were like listening to the same stuff I was listening to. And, I was on the lacrosse team, club lacrosse, not super serious. And yeah, I think like they like kind of default you onto the lacrosse team if they see a kid from Maryland who's played before, like at Carleton. They're like, you're coming with us. So, I was kind of like, oh, why it's the metal kid or whatever, like, if you want some crazy stuff, like go to him. But I was kind of like exploring lots of more, how do I put this? Like I was sort of just like going through what was within reach at the time. I think that it wasn't until later that like I really expanded sort of like my knowledge and sort of exposure to broader metal subcultures and things like that. I think that like metal is a lot of people think about metal and they think like all these different like subgenres that exist like
Mhm.
under it, and it really is kind of like this like crazy tree and all these different sounds. And it was later where I think I really came to appreciate that how differentiated, but sort of like tapping into like a similar force, like all these kinds of music genres, what they were doing basically.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, let's talk about that, that moment when that happened, because I think the first time that we really hung out it was at a bar in Greenpoint. Because I think we had a mutual friend, at the time I just moved to New York. I had been writing about music for the past, I don't know, year or so. And I needed a spirit guide, and someone suggested, oh, you should hit Wyatt, go see Wyatt, and go, hang out with him. Which was a great idea, great suggestion, because I do feel like you were my spirit guide in many ways, in like not just my music journalist path, but just like in introducing me to what New York is, what Brooklyn was, at that time. So, yeah, that must have been 2015, I think. Jesus, almost 10 years ago.
Wild.
Yeah, so I think at that point, yeah, you were I think you were probably writing for Vice, maybe Stereogum already, but yeah, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that unearthing of the plexus of genres beneath kind of the metal umbrella, and how you got there and what it was meaning to you at that point.
Yeah, totally. It was definitely like sort of the move to New York that did it for me.
Mm.
I had previously sort of engaged with the music that was sort of within reach, and
Mhm.
I didn't like dig too deep. Um, but when you get to New York, like all of a sudden, like all the shows that are happening around you are all these bands that you've never heard of, and they're happening at these little tiny venues. out in bars in Brooklyn. There are metal nights being hosted at, you know, all kinds of different places. And it was that move to New York that kind of like just was like an eye opener for me. You know, previously, like probably the weirdest thing I'd come across was like via, you know, Napster or something like that, where like, you know, it's like, okay, I like metal. Let me find the metal band with the weirdest name I can find. And like, next
Mm,
thing you know, like, you're like, oh, this is like Agalloch or something. And it's,
mhm,
yeah, that's a weird name. And then, that's probably like The Mantle or something when I first came across them. But like then you get to New York and it's like, oh wait, you're literally just scratching the surface. And
mhm,
you know, there's so many bands, there's so many people who like make this kind of stuff their life. Um, I moved to New York, I think it was like 2010 or so. Yeah, I think it was 2010, and it was like right around the time that Cold Cave's like Cherish the Light Years came out, and that was like a fun one to be like listening to while you're just kind of like experiencing the thrill of like what New York is, like
mm,
late nights, going out, sort of like discovering everything around you. That album had this like crazy energy, and it started off with this song, "The Great Pan is Dead," I think, and it's just sort of like this explosion of like cathartic, like, you know, just like it literally sounds like it explodes like with energy, and it's sort of
mm,
um almost celebratory in a way. And I think that that kind of was like the spirit with which, you know, you kind of engage with what's around you the first time you get to a place where there's just so much going on. And I started, you know, wanting to like, I always had like sort of a writing bug, and I went to Columbia Journalism School shortly after I got to New York. And you know, I started wanting to be like, I want to write about this stuff.
mm,
And you know, that's how I came to Invisible Oranges, which was like a blog that was later bought by Brooklyn Vegan. And it was like, okay, the people who are writing for this website like know so much more about heavy metal than like I do. Like people like Doug Moore, Mike Nelson. Doug's in a bunch of fantastic bands. He's the vocalist in Piran, and I think you know, many more. And they just have this like encyclopedic knowledge. So I like learn from them, like
mm,
Mike Nelson, who was sort of the editor in chief at Invisible Oranges, later managing editor at Stereogum, and they kind of gave me a chance on like, hey, come write for us. And I just absorbed through their knowledge the broader sphere of you know, just the depths and you know, almost like academic style thinking around music.
mhm,
Like they brought like a real intellectual rigor to sort of thinking about this stuff. And I think that's something that I had never really understood before. And you know, it's something worth studying and worth like sort of like developing knowledge around. And you know, New York was a great place to do it. And you said Greenpoint, and obviously I think Greenpoint probably plays a lot of pivotal moments in a lot of like New York music people's you know, experience of the city,
mhm.
especially if you're a metalhead, because you know the bar St. Vitus was there, and then St. Vitus was sort of like
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Yeah,
Yeah,
major bummer. I have a feeling they'll be back. We'll
I
see.
hope so.
Uh, but that was just such like a cultural beacon for all this stuff, and the lineups that they were curating, you know, Dave Castillo and all the other George, everybody there already, they were doing like an incredible job. And not to mention the communities around them, like people like Brandon, who you interviewed a few days ago, and Fred at Brooklyn Vegan.
Mhm,
You know, bringing in these bands to this space where you could reliably come and see something you've never seen before, like on any given night. So I think honestly that I probably ended up in Greenpoint like all other people, because that's where all this was happening.
mhm,
And I remember that first night at Vitus when Liturgy, I think, was the first show.
mm,
I was there, and it's just kind of like blowing your mind. They, you know, they just released Aesthetica, which is just sort of like this like brilliant light, like you know, I said exploded early, but like euphoric kind of like black metal thing. And it was just kind of like, wow, the you know, complexity and the kaleidoscopic you know, different shades and colors that can surround this stuff is really remarkable. And it was just, you know, it's a never ending exploration around all these bands that are releasing incredible music in this space.
mhm. Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the origins of your column, because it's been going for so long. Like, how did it come about? What was, what was the intention? And I, it's impressive to do anything as long as you've done this. Like, what's been like the motivating force, for consistency
Y-
and
y-
not letting it go.
Yeah. So Black Market at Stereogum. So I mentioned Mike Nelson earlier. He's sort of like a mentor, somebody who really gave me like my intro into writing about music. He was formerly the editor at Invisible Oranges. And I remember like at the time I was at one point, like I really got into like tapes, like metal tapes, black metal tapes, because I'd never really seen this kind of culture before. And obviously this is something that goes way back, people tape trading by mail and so on, but like you go to shows and everybody's selling tapes. And I thought, this is so cool. And I started like, buying up tapes for like $4 or $5,
Hmm.
maybe six. And I was like listening to stuff. It's like, it's so obscure. There's like copies of like 20 editions of 25 are all hand numbered, or like there's this guy made 4 tapes and, you know, burned them with like a cattle prod or something and put it in
Hmm.
a wooden box. And I was just sort of fascinated by this. And Mike Nelson was like, hey, this is like a long, circuitous route, I guess, to get to your question. But Mike Nelson was like, hey, why don't you like write a column about tapes? So I started doing that, and I put together a tape column. I think we call it like Fast Forward Rewind, where we like sort of talk about like the best in these like super obscure tapes that were coming out, and that was on Invisible Oranges.
Hmm.
Um, and then Mike Nelson got tapped to go to. Funny thing about that, like I tried to do a story about that when I was at J school, and my professor was like, "It's not a thing." And then like tapes have like steadily become like along with vinyl, like the resurgence has been crazy over the last decade or so, and
Mhm.
you see like Taylor Swift releasing tapes and things. But Mike Nelson got tapped to go to Stereogum, and he's going to be their managing editor. And he sort of like assembled a crew of us, all Invisible Oranges writers, to come with him to write this column at Stereogum. So
Mhm.
Mike Nelson had the idea. He was like, we should be, have a place where we're like talking about the best heavy metal, every month. Like there's so much good metal coming out. It's crazy, and you only see a fraction of it if you're, just sort of tangentially we're watching the space. So he brought me, Doug Moore, and Aaron Larviere over from Invisible Oranges to write this column. Doug and Aaron also had been editors of Invisible Oranges. I was like the one person who wasn't who
Hmm.
wasn't actually ever in charge of that site who got involved with this column, because Ian Chainey came over later too. And we started writing this column, and I think it's been over 10 years, which is crazy to think about.
Wow.
Um, and it's like it started out as the top 15 tracks of the month. We write a little blurb about each one. And there's like an intro piece. And that intro piece is, really just sort of like an incredibly thoughtful essay, usually written by, first it was Mike, then it was Doug, and now it's Ian. And like their minds just like work in incredible ways.
Mhm.
They are metal encyclopedias. They have such deep knowledge. They're really like just sort of like I've learned so much from all of them, and
Mhm.
they've been leading the column, but I'm like a blurb machine, I guess, and
Mhm.
I'm just kind of like always writing about whatever I find interesting, and
Mhm.
it's a nice place just to share things that you like without having to, we're only sharing stuff we like. So we're
Yeah.
not like the absolute music critics out there. We're just kind of giving exposure to things that we think are really worth your time and checking out. And amazing enough, it's gone on for over 10 years. Now Ian Chainey's in charge. And man, like everybody should be reading Ian, because he's just such like an incredible source of knowledge on this.
Mhm.
I occasionally write the intro, but not all that often. It's probably like under 5 times in my history. It's a lot of work. So
Mhm.
hats off to Ian for doing the main heavy lifting for a long time.
Cool. Carrying the torch.
Yeah.
Cool. That's amazing. And then, I mean, at what point, because at one point obviously you're still doing the column at Stereogum, but you sort of deprioritized your role as journalist and, went to business school, went to SoundCloud. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about like the impetus for that transition, and then, that journey as well, because that's already been, yeah, I mean, I feel like that was yesterday, but it's already a few years ago at this point.
Yeah. I've been at SoundCloud for almost 7 years at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, I know it's time flies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I still write, and so I've always had that outlet, but like I was ready to do something different. Journalism is a challenging, job. And I think most of us who do, this kind of like metal writing, like I think you can count on maybe one hand or two, how many people kind of like make that their full-time thing.
Mhm.
So I kind of realized I wasn't going to be one of them. I didn't really want to. I didn't really have it in me. But music had sort of shaped everything I'd done, to that point. Uh, you know, eh, at in my time in New York, and that's there. Next thing you know, you blink, and there's 7 years, there's 10 years, and it's like,
Mhm.
wow, this is kind of where I am now.
Mhm.
Cool place to be. But yeah, I decided I wanted to do something different, and having seen kind of the like how culturally rich and deeply artistic communities and underground music can be. I thought like this is kind of like not right when, but like streaming was becoming very clearly the dominant force in how people were consuming music. And I thought like, hey, maybe I have something to offer here, in terms of like how do we surface stuff that we know is cool and is underground and very worth your time, but how do you find that stuff, and like there's so many barriers to entry, um to actually find interesting things. It's time consuming. It requires a lot of you to want to stay on top of all this stuff. And I thought, wonder if I can like help out with that in some sort of like uh way that enriches artist communities and helps them gain exposure. Obviously, streaming is like it's there's so many different ways to use streaming. Whether you're just kind of like hit and play and letting the algorithm do its work, or you're really deep diving into the fact that you now have the entire world's music at your fingertips.
Mhm.
um how can we help you on your journey find interesting music, and how artists can we help you uh get your music heard by people who might be interested. So I ended up at SoundCloud. They took a chance on me. They saw my background, as a journalist, writing about music, and it was a great fit. And I've been here ever since. And I like to think that at SoundCloud we have really interesting communities on the platform that exist because we have social engagement features. So
Mhm.
artists come to SoundCloud and organize themselves, like basically based on like, hey, I like your music. I'm going to like it. I'm going to repost it. I'm going to share it. And maybe at some point I'm going to take the leap from becoming like a fan to becoming a creator myself, because I've already sort of embedded myself into this community,
Mhm.
which, because there are signals that there are engagement features that allow me to become a part of a community here at SoundCloud that don't exist other places.
Yeah.
And they might exist other places, but at SoundCloud, we are the only purely music focused app that, has all of this. It's all
Mhm.
about music.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, which I appreciate. Obviously the community driven features of SoundCloud. I mean, that's something that is near and dear to my heart. I'm curious, this is sort of a two-pronged question. But one, since you've been working there for 7 years, which I can't believe. What's I mean, that's like a whole pandemic and a whole so much has happened in that amount of time. I'm curious what the biggest changes in your mind has been to SoundCloud in that time. And then I wonder if you could also touch on, pretty often when I am talking to like a founder, like a budding founder, or just a person describing some new exciting emerging space that has some sort of community driven element to it and is involved with music, it's oftentimes described as like, oh yeah, like early SoundCloud vibes. it's like SoundCloud, but like the early SoundCloud vibes, like the old SoundCloud. Like that's something that people say, pretty often. And I wonder, I understand what they're saying, when they're talking about that. But I wonder if you could touch on that, and if you feel like, SoundCloud, really has diverged from that, or if it's still got that, that energy. Like I feel like, every time I write about SoundCloud these days, there's still like this new, artist focused feature, artist centric feature, community driven feature, like user powered royalties, like all of these things that aren't happening, anywhere else in the streaming ecosystem. So I wonder if that's this is a long question, but ultimately I'm just trying to tap into like where you see SoundCloud is, relative to that sort of old foundational energy it had that, it was built on.
Yeah, you give long question. I'll probably end up giving a long answer, but I think that a lot of people are sort of associating that feeling with like the music that they were engaging with at that time. When I think for a lot of people they associate SoundCloud with like electronic music of various kinds, DJ sets, so on and so forth. Also, there were some real stars that rose out of like rap from SoundCloud, and
Mhm.
SoundCloud rap. It's a genre tag for a lot of people. I don't think any of that's changed, and you called out a lot of sort of the features that have been introduced. In recent years, like I think we've really been finding a lot of momentum in introducing product features that cater to artists and communities. And I think that what what we've done is want to put in place things that help those communities and moments and movements really kind of like take place. And I would say that like where I sit, I see incredible stuff all the time
Mm.
uh, coming up, new sounds, new waves of music, entire new subgenres that sort of exist in the wake of different styles of music. So like we see somebody as influential as like we see like an influential rap album come along, like take like Playboy Cardi's Whole Lotta Red. We can see like an entire community of artists like creating music that clearly is sort of like in that zeitgeist. And because I think we have the social features that are in place on SoundCloud, and comments and things like that, it creates a space where a lot of artists can come together and fans and connect over this music to talk about it in a deeper level than you can get on another
Mhm.
platform. So I don't think that like that is changed. I think that it's just that the music is changing, and music is constantly changing. And the cool thing about SoundCloud is that like if there's something you're looking for, you can probably find a community around it if you go looking. Like whether it's optic chanting or you name it, you can find it, and
Cool.
there'll be like a network there. People like to follow, see who's following who, and things like that. And you can find some amazing music and communities.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that's oftentimes the missing layer on streaming platforms, is just that you can kind of follow those rabbit holes, to varying degrees in different places, but you never get to the community behind them. Like it's almost like a lot of streaming platforms go out of their way to abstract context away, really pushing playlisting and things that are more lean back, so that like you're not even paying attention to who the artist is on this one playlist where you heard it. It's like it's a mood based thing. Um, and pretty soon you're just listening to chill playlist on Spotify, and you sort of forget that like, oh yeah, there's actually like 25 artists on this playlist who have made music, and this is all really meaningful. Or this could be, really meaningful, like me engaging with that person's music, but that layer has really been abstracted away. Like there is, it's become really difficult. There's a lot of friction between the person who's listening to the music and the person who's making it, for them to ever be able to connect directly.
Yeah, and I think like enabling that kind of connection isn't something that we've tried to do. And also, I think it's a real area of opportunity, like you said, kind of for a lot of folks, because as the number of tracks being released every single day has like gone like this over the
Yeah,
last
600,000.
however many years.
Mhm.
I think helping people find context and meaning to what they're listening to is going to be increasingly important, and of
Mhm.
course the number of tracks that's being released, and just sort of like the flood of music. This has occurred while a lot of like sort of music journalism platforms have gone away or have shrunk. So what is the role of sort of helping people find what they like, and like you said, like a playlist can be sort of a way for some listeners to engage with music in a way that suits them. Other people want to find a deeper connection, and I imagine, anybody who's probably listening to this is in that boat.
Mhm.
And y- you know it's taken a lot of you see a lot of people sort of like starting new ways of connecting, like you've done at Gray Matter, and because there is a hunger for it, and I think that y- you know we do a lot of that at SoundCloud, and obviously it's something that we want to continue to keep enabling, like that direct artist to fan connection is sort of like what fuels the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been kind of the buzzword across the music industry over the past like year and a half,
Yeah,
direct artist fan,
yeah.
super fan.
It's not NFT anymore, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. I mean, as there becomes more and more content, more and more music, I don't think music is content. As there becomes more and more music, there needs to be more and more curation, or at least we have to care, apply more care toward, our curatory efforts, which of course is one of the things that we're doing here in telling the stories of music heads, and then in the background documenting all the music mentions that come up, in the conversation, to show that like music can really be this really powerful connective tissue. Um, which leads me to the next part of the podcast. I'm going to ask you a few more pointed questions about the music that you are listening to these days.
okay.
Um, but first, I'd love to hear more about how you are discovering music, because it's been such a big part of your life. And I'm wondering if you could answer that through some of your favorite curators or outlets or platforms that you're engaging with.
Yeah, I've been really, like I said, like everybody who I shouted out earlier, Ian Chainey, Doug Moore, all the people I've had the pleasure of like working with. Like Ian is such an incredible. Ian alone could basically like manage your, metal music personalization for you, and he's always sending me like the greatest stuff. So friends, colleagues are really a huge part in this. Sound I'll get to SoundCloud in a second, because SoundCloud's like its own entire category here of just music discovery. But like I'm often looking for um my inbox is always awash in promos, so I'm never at a lack for things to listen to. But Bandcamp obviously is a source too. It's particularly metal. They've really carved out a lane. And it's been a real good source. But I think like also some labels in metal kind of act as their own like kind of obviously labels have like a taste profile and
Mhm.
often like a mission, or sort of like a framing that they adhere to. And I think there are some great labels out there that have always helped you find good stuff. One that's really been doing a lot recently that I think is fantastic and has like sort of like a good vibe and message around it is FIA, FIADH, run by Barry Ann Tweet. She's got incredible taste, and puts out an incredible array of music on, every Friday. You can count on an incredible new batch of stuff coming out of FIA. And then there are a lot of other labels that, offer that kind of curatorial, perspective. But I think, that's how I like find a lot of metal type music.
Mhm.
But you know, in my day job, like at SoundCloud, I'm coming across so much interesting stuff constantly. And
Mm.
you know, we have you know, I work in sort of like analytics and data, and we have like incredible tools at our disposal that allow us to like sort of like think about visualizing communities and like who's important within a community, what's growing with, you know, in terms of streams in various ways, and who's influential within their sphere, within their community. And then that's just such an incredible you know, seat to have when it comes to music discovery, because we're watching new music, you know, trends happen in real time, you know, from very, very early stages. Uh, and you know, that's how I find most of my music.
Mm.
You know, I when I was really young, hip hop and rap was like a big thing for me, but like obviously it's taken on like a whole new uh you know, multi-layered meaning for me in my role at SoundCloud, because we have such incredible you know, music being created in those lanes, and just watching what's next and what's coming has been so cool. You
Yeah.
know, it's really, and you see influences colliding, like genres, sort of boundaries of genre blending, blurring, being broken down and reinvented like in real time. You know, it was like a few years ago you started seeing like sort of like gothy hip hop vibes, and you know, you start seeing like Deftones like being like sort of like incorporated into different kinds of like, you know, aesthetic like inspiration and things like that, and it's just taken on this really interesting cultural space where we're always watching cool things happen.
Yeah. Cool. I love that. Um, yeah, it's cool that you can trust your day job to just introduce you to a shit ton of good music.
It's definitely a pretty cool perk.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and it's always changing because the communities are so vital and vibrant. You know, like,
Mhm.
it's a space where people create, and you know, clearly, you know, I think music tastes have become more omnivorous for like new generations increasingly, because they grew up having everything at your fingertips. It wasn't like, you know,
Yeah.
me, where I had an older brother who's feeding me like one kind of lane of music or whatever, and then you kind of take it from there and explore. Like, you know, the boundaries are porous, and if there are boundaries at all, and you
Mhm.
know, see different production styles that incorporate um, wide, you know, varieties of interests and inspirations, and it's pushing music in really awesome ways.
Yeah. I love that. Um, okay, speaking of, who are three artists of note that you've heard for the first time in, approximately the past year?
Last year, um, first time, that's tricky. Okay, so I don't know if this is cheating a little bit, but because I know the artist, but this is a new project, and that's the thing you run into a lot of in the metal world. It's
Yeah,
like,
makes
you know, you've
sense.
got these one man, one woman, man bands that kind of do it all, and then they've got a never ending bag of tricks for pulling out new bands. But one that really sort of clicked with me in the last year, and I actually wrote a little piece about it as an intro to the Black Market a few months, maybe a month or two ago, was Summer Haze '99. And you know, that's your band title. It's sort of like this crazy, talk about inspirations colliding. It's sort of like, you know, black metal meets post-hardcore meets lounge jazz meets yeah, I know, it's crazy, and sort of meets you know, kind of like classic, you know, big hair heavy metal at certain times,
Wow.
from this guy Eric Lilleth, who's also in like a bunch of other bands. Like I said, Bergfried is another one where he's sort of doing this like kind of like romantic rock metal ballad thing. He That album Summer Haze '99, Inevitable, was one that really stuck with me, and that came
Mm.
out, I think, maybe it's a little over a year ago. So give me some slack there, I hope.
Yeah, that's fine. That counts. We'll count it.
Okay. And another one, and you talked about where do you find new music. I think certain artists are just such, like, again, they put out so much music that they, in the metal space, where like you go to their Bandcamp page or something, they'll have like 30 releases over the last however many years.
Mm.
And like, how do you even do this? But this one band, this guy Damien Anton Ojeda. His best known band is this project called Sadness, and it's sort of coined. I think for a lot of people, it's sort of like the origin of what's known as black gaze, where it's sort of like black metal meets shoegaze. And it's sort of like really kind of pretty meditative, black metalish palette. And that term black gaze, I think, was actually coined by Mike Nelson, who was the guy who I used to work with, real mentor to me, and started the black market column at Stereogum. I think he coined that one. But Sadness last year did like this series of splits where he was doing a split like every month. There'd be like one or two splits coming out, and one of those splits was with a band, another solo project called Abriction, and it's from this young woman, from what I can tell, who's like sort of like north of New York City, maybe like on one of the like Bandcamp pages. It looks like it's like I think it looks like Carytown or something, Sleepy Hollow, and her music is incredible. It's sort of like this. Her latest album, Banshee, was, I saw somebody describe it as if the entire MySpace era of music was distilled into one album.
Oh,
Yeah,
what a line!
yeah. I was like, that's a great selling point.
Yeah.
So Abriction was another one, and let's go something from SoundCloud here. So it's a little over a year ago, but one artist that sort of like came up and like just kind of like floored me when I first heard it was this artist, Hard Rock, a rapper out of Atlanta, sort of like doing these like big blown out ragey pluggy type beats, sort of like with that gothic aesthetic I was mentioning. And he had this song called God's Hands that just kind of like floored me the first time I heard it. Okay, this is over a year ago, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's definitely over a year ago. But yeah, that song still is like, man, what a gem. And just totally cool. Like, it's so awesome.
Okay,
I'll cap it there.
cool. Yeah, thank you. Okay, cool. My next question is, what's the first album you ever purchased, and then what's the most recent?
Okay, first album I ever purchased. I purchased. I think it might have been Beck's Loser
Oh, nice.
on CD. And I think it was like a single at the time, and it had this sort of like, CD spines were traditionally either like clear or black. And I think it had a white CD spine, if I remember correctly. And I think I picked that up at Tower, and that was like the first thing that I might have said, like, I want to buy this.
Nice.
Mom, Dad.
Yeah, like, okay, Wyatt, you can.
Yeah, like, okay. I hope this isn't like foreboding, like with this, prophetic with what you're purchasing here. But yeah, that might have been the first. I could be wrong. Most recent, I think I actually picked up. Most recent thing I bought was probably that Abriction album Banshee on vinyl, because I was like, this thing is so good.
Cool.
So I picked it up.
Cool. Okay, now here's the big question for you. Going to a desert island and you get to bring 3 records with you. What are they?
Oh geez. I knew something like this was gonna be coming.
Sorry.
Doesn't make it any easier. So I might, and none of this is music that's fit for like a desert island in any way, probably. Yeah, it's not chill. And given that this is a complete hypothetical, I'll
Yeah, go with
yeah, maybe Amorphis, Elegy, or Tales of a Thousand Lakes. That's a really tough one. Maybe I'll go with Elegy.
Okay.
A little lighter for the sunlight, I guess.
Cool.
And this is tricky. Maybe like Outcast, ATLiens.
Oh, nice.
Like I think I burned that into my brain many times through growing up. Just forever and ever, like on repeat. And last one, oh geez. And this is like not super like metalhead cool necessarily, but maybe like AFI Sing the Sorrow.
AFI, A
Yeah,
Fire Inside.
maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh man,
But
I used to listen to that record a lot, like
so,
back in high school.
yeah, it's just one of those albums that like hit at the right time. You know, it's like
Yeah.
high school and like I remember, like just playing it super loud, driving at night. You know, and I feel like a common thread for a lot of the stuff that I've listed and listened to, it's just like an earnestness, you know,
Mhm.
like this music is theatrical, it's over
Yeah.
the top, it's not afraid to sort of you know lean into these sort of like grandiose themes and stuff. And I think that's what metal does really well is like it's unabashedly leaning into those peaks and valleys. And
Hmm.
you know, I think that that's what you know. I don't like put on like a super cool, level-headed, you know, critical hat often when I'm writing about stuff. Like, it's meant to be exciting and
Mhm.
it's meant to get you going. And you know, I think kind of embracing that and the fact that people are really pouring everything into this stuff is what draws a lot of people to metal. You know, like it doesn't surprise me that you often see like a link between like fantasy literature and heavy
Mhm.
metal because like you know it's this over the top stuff and it's what keeps things exciting. And so like you know I think it's fun and you gotta lean into that.
Totally. That was a great testimonial for metal music, I must say. As a non-metalhead, but like kind of metal adjacent, I am I'm feeling inspired to lean further in. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, check out the we got a new column going up tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
So,
Okay.
so
Well,
so we got some new picks for the in there.
okay.
I,
Perfect.
I I guess it's a little bit of a sneak peek, but I would shout out the new Sleepwalker record as being one that's really cool. Super obscure, like totally anonymous project, but yeah, that's one that's a highlight for me this month.
Cool. Amazing. Cool, man. Well, that's about all I got. It's been great to connect. For those who are listening who want to, read the column or follow along with anything else that you're doing, that you're willing to share, what is a good place for people to, to check that out or follow you?
Yeah, so Stereogum, the column's the black market. It runs on the last day of the month. And we've been going for 10 years at this point, which is kind of amazing. So new one tomorrow on Halloween. Always,
That's the
always,
Halloween
always a
edition.
special metal column when it lands on
Yeah,
Halloween, right?
yeah.
I think we've been doing a thing where we kind of link it with horror film
Mm,
stuff in the beginning for the last few years. So Ian Chainey, who writes the intro, will be diving into that. You know, at SoundCloud, I would say just you know, like look for what we're it's choose your own adventure on SoundCloud, but like the home tab always has a lot of cool stuff that we're putting in front of users, and we think that you might like. But personally, if you want to reach out to me, you can get me on Twitter at Wyatt B Marshall at Twitter. Not much of an Instagrammer. Put that one private a while ago. Don't
mm.
think I posted in a few years. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Cool. Twitter it is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Or
And
yeah, X, I guess now. Yeah.
oh yeah. Well, no, I mean I still call it Twitter. I'm not gonna let Elon Musk make make a unilateral decision to just change that for everybody. So
I still end up calling it Twitter. So
it, um last question for you. Now that you've been through the ringer of For the Record, who is another music head that we should have on the show?
oh man. Ian would be so good. Ian Chainey.
Mm,
Um and Doug Moore would also be really good.
cool. Cool.
Doug's I can happily connect you with either one of them.
Amazing.
You know, they're both super thoughtful. They'll give way better answers than I did, and their depth of knowledge is 20 times deeper. So
Well, what in my book, all of your answers were very thoughtful, and you have a pretty deep knowledge of this stuff yourself. So yeah, I mean, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing it today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. Thanks for the invite, and Mark, thank you. This has been cool, and I think it's an awesome series that you're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, we're enjoying it. This is episode number 52, so it's got
weekly.
Yeah, it's been coming out weekly. It's been coming out.
Congrats! It's a year then, right?
That's true. 52 is a year.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we haven't quite gotten every week in there, but pretty close. So I guess from a For the Record perspective, this is our first annual anniversary. So there you go. This is special.
Congratulations, milestones. Yeah.
Indeed.
Well,
it's good to see you.
Thanks so much. Good seeing you. Say hi to me for Carol, and I'll can't wait to see you next time, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise for Liz. Give her a hug. Tell her hi.
Yeah, we'll do. All right, man. Talk to you.
Well, man, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Thanks everyone for being here. That is a wrap on another episode of For the Record, a conversation series with all manner of music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. It's a production of Grey Matter and the new Crate Coalition experiment in building connective listening graphs. We stamp every music mention that you heard here, from the names of musicians to DJs to journalists to venue owners. And in the background, we're mapping these names to form those yet unseen connective threads between. Want to get involved? Check out our website, greymatter.fm. It's gray with an E. Or you can come hang out in the Crate Coalition Discord. We'll see you next time.